I really thought that I would be able to play Trails of Cold Steel 2 weeks, months after finishing Trails of Cold Steel 1. I had honestly perhaps intended on playing through the entire Sky trilogy before playing Trails of Cold Steel 2. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky trilogy is a prequel to Cold Steel. I thought that I would be able to do it, but I was very, very wrong. 2 or 3 days after finishing Cold Steel 1, I was just compelled. I had to put the disc into my PS5 and just get started. There was no way. I had to know what happened. Now, I'm going to be really honest. It is absolutely impossible not to spoil Cold Steel 1 when talking about a literal direct sequel. It takes place 2 months after the events of the first game. And so I just strongly encourage you that if you are interested in this series, go back and watch my Trails of Cold Steel 1 review, which I've linked up in the card up here. Watch that review and let me know what you think and get started there. But for those of you who are very interested in my thoughts on Trails of Cold Steel 2, I haven't held back. Here is my complete review for you. Seeing the country of Erebonia being torn apart by war was more impactful than I thought it would be. After spending an entire game getting to know the citizens of towns such as Keldic or the good people of Trista, where Thor's military academy is located, the losses hit a little heavier than I thought they would to me personally. The agency to stop the Erebonian Civil War continued to hit harder and harder with each progressing chapter, as the Noble Alliance and their provincial armies seemed to know exactly where to attack. As the Noble Alliance and the Imperial Army battle it out for control of Erebonia, it's easy to recognize that there's far more at stake than just the control of the country. As someone who, as of the recording of this video, has not played the Crossbell arc, I'm waiting for the PS4 versions to come out, I have no idea whatsoever what is going on over there. Ouroboros is a mystery that, again, I'm fully aware has some answers in the Sky trilogy, but for me, I have no idea what's going on. And that's honestly a unique part of the storytelling in this game. If you know, you know. If you don't know, you want to know. Perhaps the most emotionally impactful part of Trails of Cold Steel 2 is the payoff after having to abandon everyone you know and love to safety to protect the Divine Knight Valimar and the protagonist Reen. Those final few moments with Reen screaming at the cat and Elisa smiling at Reen through Valimar's visor, I was literally angsting at my screen, knowing that this game was about to become a cliffhanger and Class 7 would be split up. So as you might guess, going into Cold Steel 2, one of your primary tasks is to reunite the members of Class 7 and try to make sense of the crazy ending of Cold Steel 1. Much of this is done through retreading old ground. In fact, a lot of this game is going back to old locations, albeit many times they've opened up things with a few new areas to explore. Given the game is a direct sequel, I'm not surprised at the reuse of areas from the first game. Initially, I was a little frustrated that nothing was new. Revisiting Ruhr and Keldic was nice, but it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be, and I wasn't expecting to just retread old ground. Thankfully, the similar locales are broken up by new places to explore and new things to do that easily set the game apart from the first. Fast travel from location to location is eventually unlocked, along with the ability to travel fast across the different overworld fields. Riding on Angelica's bike from the first game along the grassy plains of the Nord Highlands was a real treat. One of my biggest complaints about the first game, the lack of speedy travel options, was quickly taken care of. In my Cold Steel 1 review, I didn't really talk about the visuals all that much because as far as JRPGs go, this game is very basic. It looks great, it's serviceable, it tells the story. However, one of the things that Cold Steel 2 does is really ramp up the visual effects. From traveling with Valimar to some of the special attacks in the game, Cold Steel 2 is flashy, it's fun. and this elevates the cutscenes and battles even further from the first title. In comparison to Cold Steel 1 though, Cold Steel 2's story beats happen quickly. And I've tried really hard to avoid any imagery in this review that would tell you some of the major things that happen in Cold Steel 2, but it's kind of hard not to talk about some of it. You're getting all of Class 7 and all of Thor's military academy back together again. So you're traveling from place to place, so there's a reason you have to travel, there's a way you have to travel, but again, if you haven't played it, I don't want to spoil it. I'm not going to tell you other than it does happen, fast travel's there, and it's really, really nice. The story, it progresses much quicker than the previous. And you know what? Everything about this title is just exceedingly better. And the combat is a little bit more refined. It's a little bit faster. Literally, it feels slightly sped up. As a person who played Cold Steel 1 and pretty much so jumped into Cold Steel 2, I noticed the enemy actions don't take quite as long to execute. So from the time you press the attack button to the attack showing on screen, it just feels a little bit more snappy, a little bit quicker. Not super fast, like you have the turbo mode turned on, but just slightly faster, like they wanted to really get that pacing just a little bit better. Otherwise, in all actuality, it's the same turn-based battle system that was in the first game. There aren't any major differences. They add a couple of more systems, such as the Overdrive Mode, which allows you to attack 3 times in succession. It also allows you to heal up and get a little bit more EP and CP points for the character you're going into Overdrive with and the person that they're linked with. So that's very cool. It's a new system. Reen has a couple of neat powers in the game that I don't want to spoil all that much. Again, if you played Cold Steel 1, you probably have an idea of what's happening, but it just makes the battling a little bit better. Now, I don't personally know if the battles were easier and the characters were easier to fight in some of the big boss battles, but I had far less trouble in Cold Steel 2 beating some of the bigger bosses than I did in Cold Steel 1. In fact, it wasn't until the very end of the game that I had to do any grinding at all. Otherwise, I just found myself fighting all the monsters on the overworld and going from place to place with really little to no trouble. I don't really know if the game is all that much easier or if it's the fact that I personally am better at playing it and that my characters are level 130 plus. I have never in my life had a character in my party with over 20,000 hit points before. That was really, really crazy. Of course, the damage that is done to them and the damage that they do is also very, very increased. Trails of Cold Steel 2 also includes what you first experienced at the end of 1, and that is fighting with your Divine Knight, Valimar. These battles are a little bit different in that they're typically one-on-one or one-on-3 experiences with a very slow back and forth. You have giant mechs fighting one another. They all have very high HP, and it takes a little bit of time to figure out the weaknesses that Valimar can use to trigger heavier and more hard attacks. And again, everything just has a lot of HP, so it takes longer. It's a mech battle. It's gonna take a minute. And they're all very cool, and there aren't very many. However, they do become a little bit repetitive. You know exactly when Reen's going to go, Valimar, the Ashen Knight, and summon him. You just know. You just know when you're gonna get there. You can summon Valimar in any battle, actually, at one point, almost any battle at one point, but you only get him for 3 turns, and then he goes away again. But you do have the longer, more protracted Divine Knight battles against other soldats and other large creatures, and you know, I don't want to spoil too much of it. They're fun fights. They're neat fights. I don't know that I loved them. The fact that you can have a party member help you with that was very, very useful, because without a party member helping, my Divine Knight Valimar would have been dead in 5 minutes. The fact that I could have Elliot use Resounding Beat on my Divine Knight, every time. I didn't use anyone else because no one else could heal Valimar except for Elliot, at least that I ever discovered. Plus, I like Elliot. Elliot was my bro throughout the whole game. But in all actuality, this game was a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed it. I found myself fully and completely invested in these battles. I found myself fully and completely invested in the storyline. And unlike the previous game, I actually decided I wanted to do everything because the way they handled side quests was so much better. It was very clear what you needed to do every single time. You had fast travel that would help you move very quickly from place to place around the map if you needed to. And they all felt a little bit more important. They all felt a little bit more meaningful to the story, and none of them were that long. In fact, a lot of times you could just snap right through them and get done very, very quickly. So I did it all, even the hidden side quests. Yes, I looked up a guide so I could get them all because I wanted the best grade at the end of the game. Speaking of grades, what do I give this title? What do I think about Cold Steel 2? Honestly, I think it is way better than the first one. However, you have to play the first one for the second one to make a lot of sense. I would never, ever, ever advise playing Cold Steel 2 without playing Cold Steel 1. Because at the end of the day, it really feels like they developed these titles literally alongside each other, one after the next, or that it really wasn't two titles to begin with, but just one that at some point they said, well, we're gonna have to cut this in half and do 2 games. After 150 hours of playing Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2, do I recommend it? Absolutely. They're still flawed. They're still imperfect games. Some of my complaints about the repetitiveness in Cold Steel 2 when it comes to the environments is real. You feel like, well, I've already been here. I've already spent a lot of time here. But at the same time, the fact that you had spent so much time there made it even more meaningful as all sorts of bad things were happening. The fact that the world was so quickly changing and the situation was changing moment to moment made all of these different story beats and all these towns you had been to before a little bit more meaningful. And to the game's credit, after the first couple of hours, well, after the first 10 or so hours, it does give you new places to explore mixed in with the old. So it didn't feel completely repetitive. But I'm a huge fan of these games, and it's hard for me to negatively criticize them all that much. I had way more fun with 2 than 1, if that says anything, given how much fun I had with Cold Steel 1. And I really can't wait to play more. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about this series, if you love it as much as I do, and we'll catch you again in the next video. Have a great one.